She was delivered to the wrong ranch, but the little girl who called her Mama changed everything. The morning sun rose slowly over the quiet town, painting the wide fields of the ranch in soft gold. Birds chirped lazily, and the gentle rustling of leaves in the wind added a peaceful rhythm to the early hours. On this particular morning, however, an unexpected event was about to change the lives of everyone in the town, in ways no one could have imagined. A baby girl had been born at the small hospital on the edge of town. She was tiny, with soft dark hair and eyes that seemed unusually bright for her age. She cried the way newborns do, loud and demanding attention, but there was something about her voice that seemed to tug at everyone around her. The nurses cooed at her, wrapped her in soft blankets, and made sure she was fed and warm. Yet, as the morning went on, a mistake quietly unfolded. A clerk in the hospital, distracted by the chaos of a busy morning and the shuffling of countless forms, accidentally delivered the baby to the wrong ranch. The ranch in question belonged to a family known for their kindness, honesty, and love for animals. The ranch was spread out over acres of green land, with wooden fences dividing pastures filled with grazing horses and cows. The main house, large but cozy, sat at the center. Inside lived the matriarch of the family, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a warm heart. She had always loved children, but she and her husband had struggled to have one of their own. Despite this, she poured her love into the animals, the land, and the community around her. That morning, the ranch hand arrived with a small bundle wrapped in a blanket, assuming it was a delivery from a nearby family expecting help. The woman gently unwrapped the blanket and was shocked to see the tiny baby inside. Her first instinct was surprise, followed quickly by concern. She called for her husband, and together they examined the baby. "She's beautiful," the woman whispered, feeling a strange tug at her heart. "But she isn't ours." The man nodded, equally bewildered. "We need to call the hospital," he said. But even as he reached for the phone, he noticed the way the baby looked at them, her eyes wide and curious, searching for someone to hold her. There was a silence, a quiet moment that seemed to stretch forever. In that instant, the ranch matriarch felt something she had never expected. A connection, a pull that went beyond logic or circumstance. The baby's tiny fingers curled around her hand, and in that simple gesture, the woman knew that she could not simply send her back without care. The baby needed warmth, love, and security, and in that moment, the ranch felt like the only place she could find it. The decision, though complicated, was clear in her heart. They would take care of this child until the mistake could be resolved. Days turned into weeks, and as the baby grew, the bond between her and the ranch family deepened. She smiled easily, laughed in the bright sunlight of the fields, and quickly became familiar with every corner of the house. The animals seemed to recognize her presence, circling around her gently, as if acknowledging a new member of their family. Horses nuzzled her tiny hands, dogs lay quietly at her feet, and even the shy cats came closer to watch her play. The ranch matriarch found herself staying up late at night, rocking the baby in her arms, singing lullabies she had learned from her own childhood. She spoke softly to the baby, telling her stories about the ranch, the animals, and the small town that stretched beyond the horizon. Every night, as she watched the baby fall asleep, she felt an ache of both joy and sorrow. The joy of holding this precious life, and the sorrow of knowing that it might not truly belong to them. Despite the circumstances, the baby thrived. She was curious, fearless, and full of laughter. She would crawl across the wide wooden floors, reaching for the smallest objects with a determined focus. She would squeal in delight when the chickens wandered too close, and she would clap her tiny hands whenever the sunlight danced across the walls in the afternoon. The ranch matriarch often watched her and thought about how strange life could be. Here was a child who had arrived by accident, yet she seemed meant to be there, filling a space in their hearts that no one else could. The people of the town began to notice the baby too. Neighbors who stopped by for supplies or to visit the ranch would see the little girl playing in the yard and comment on her bright eyes and gentle smile. "She's lucky to have landed here," they would say. "That ranch has a way of making people feel at home." And indeed, the baby seemed happiest among the wide fields, the animals, and the gentle guidance of the woman she would soon come to call Mama. But even as the days passed peacefully, the shadow of the hospital mistake remained. Every letter, every phone call, reminded the ranch family that this child might not be theirs for long. There were moments when the matriarch would find herself imagining what would happen if she had to give the baby back. The thought was unbearable, yet she kept it locked in the back of her mind, knowing that she had to be prepared for whatever the world might demand. Still, the baby gave no thought to the mistake, no thought to the world beyond the ranch. She saw the ranch matriarch as the center of her universe. She would reach out for her when she was frightened, giggle when she was happy, and cry only when separated for a brief moment. The bond they shared grew stronger with each passing day, a silent promise forming between them that neither fully understood, but both felt deeply. One evening, as the sun set and the sky turned soft shades of pink and orange, the matriarch sat on the porch holding the baby in her lap. The baby's head rested against her shoulder, and she hummed quietly, lost in thought. "I don't know what tomorrow will bring," the woman whispered, "but for tonight, you are safe. You are home." The baby stirred slightly and smiled, as if understanding the words, even in her tiny, infant way. The ranch was not just a place of work and animals. It had become a sanctuary, a haven where love could grow even in the face of uncertainty. The baby, who had been delivered to the wrong place, had found a family in the most unexpected way. And for the ranch matriarch, who had once feared she would never hold a child of her own, this tiny human had brought hope, purpose, and a love she had never imagined possible. As the night grew darker and the stars began to twinkle above the wide fields, the ranch matriarch placed the baby gently in the crib, tucking her in with the softest blankets. She kissed the baby's forehead and whispered, "Sleep well, little one. You are loved." The baby's small hand reached up, touching the woman's face for a brief moment before curling back into the blanket, drifting into a peaceful sleep. The morning mistake, which had seemed like a simple error at first, had blossomed into something far greater. It had given the ranch family a gift they had not expected, a tiny soul who had already begun to change their hearts forever. The baby's arrival marked the beginning of a story filled with love, challenges, and the unbreakable bonds that form when life surprises you in ways you could never predict. And as the ranch lay quiet under the moonlight, with the gentle hum of crickets filling the night, the ranch matriarch knew one thing with absolute certainty. This baby girl, delivered by mistake, was not just a child who needed care. She was a child who had come to teach them all about the power of love, family, and the unexpected beauty of life. The baby girl who had arrived at the ranch by accident was now a little toddler. Her tiny legs wobbled as she learned to walk across the wooden floors, and her laughter filled the house like sunshine spilling through the windows. The ranch, which had once been quiet except for the sounds of animals and the wind in the trees, now echoed with her happy giggles. Every corner of the home seemed to come alive when she was near, and the ranch matriarch, who had grown so attached to her, found herself smiling more than she had in years. From the very first moment, the little girl had felt a deep connection with the woman she now instinctively called Mama. Her tiny hands would reach out for her in moments of fear, and she would crawl into her lap when she wanted comfort or attention. She had never known her real mother, but she didn't question the love she received at the ranch. It was natural to her, as if she had always belonged there, and the ranch matriarch in turn could not imagine a life without her. Every day was filled with small adventures. The little girl would toddle around the yard, chasing butterflies and reaching out to touch the horses' soft noses. She would laugh uncontrollably when a cow mooed loudly, and sometimes she would try to imitate the sounds, making everyone around her chuckle. The ranch matriarch often watched her from a distance, smiling and shaking her head at the child's curiosity. There was something magical about the way the little girl explored the world. With wonder in her eyes and fearless joy in her heart, the animals of the ranch seemed to recognize her as part of the family. The dogs followed her everywhere, wagging their tails and watching her carefully to make sure she didn't stumble. The horses lowered their heads so she could pet them, and even the cats, usually shy and cautious, would curl up beside her as she played. It was as if the entire ranch had welcomed her with open arms, sensing the warmth and love that surrounded her. Yet, even as life at the ranch continued happily, the shadow of the mistake from the hospital remained. Every so often, the matriarch would receive a letter or a call from the hospital, a gentle reminder that this little girl might not legally belong to them. She would look at the child, now learning to say simple words and recognize objects, and her heart would ache. How could she possibly give up someone who had become such a central part of her life? The thought of returning the child to her biological mother filled her with both sadness and worry, but she held it quietly in her heart, not wanting to burden the child with anything she could not understand. The little girl, oblivious to the complications of the world around her, thrived in the care of the ranch matriarch. She had begun to speak in small, simple sentences, calling her caregiver Mama with a tone full of love and trust. The first time she spoke the word clearly, the woman had felt tears prickling her eyes. It was the first time the child had shown such awareness of their bond, and it made the woman's heart swell with emotion. From that moment on, the word Mama became a bridge between them, a symbol of a love that had grown unexpectedly but could not be broken. Every evening, the matriarch would sit with the little girl, telling her stories about the world beyond the ranch. She spoke of faraway places, of adventures that awaited, and of the simple joys that life could offer. She would teach her about the animals on the ranch, showing her how to care for them gently and patiently. The little girl would watch intently, absorbing every word, and sometimes she would repeat the phrases with a wide-eyed seriousness that made the woman laugh. It was in these quiet, shared moments that their bond deepened layer by layer, like the roots of a tree taking hold in fertile soil. The community around the ranch began to take notice of the little girl as well. Neighbors who came to the ranch for supplies or to help with chores often paused to watch her play. "She has such bright eyes," they would say. "She seems so happy here, like she belongs." The words warmed the matriarch's heart, but they also reminded her of the delicate balance she was navigating. This child had not been born to them, yet she had become a part of their lives in a way that was undeniable. Despite the joy, there were moments of quiet anxiety. The matriarch sometimes wondered how the child's biological mother was feeling. Did she think about her baby? Was she searching? The thought was both comforting and painful. On one hand, it reminded the woman that love could extend far beyond the walls of the ranch. On the other hand, it underscored the uncertainty of their situation. She often found herself daydreaming about the future, imagining the day when the truth would be revealed. and she dreaded the possibility of having to say goodbye to the child she had grown to love so deeply. Meanwhile, the little girl's personality continued to blossom. She was curious and fearless, always eager to explore the world around her. She loved helping with chores on the ranch, whether it was feeding the chickens or carrying small bundles of hay. Her laughter was contagious, and the entire household felt lighter, happier, and more alive in her presence. Even the ranch hands, who were used to hard work and long days, found themselves stopping to watch her antics and smiling at her joyful energy. The matriarch often reflected on the twists of fate that had brought the little girl to them. If not for the hospital mistake, their lives would have continued as they had for years, quiet, orderly, and predictable. Yet now, every day was filled with small surprises, laughter, and a love that had grown without expectation. The little girl had taught them something essential, that family was not always defined by blood, but by the care, patience, and devotion one gave to another. There were also small moments of tenderness that left a lasting impression. The little girl would fall asleep on the matriarch's lap after a long day of play, her tiny fingers curling around the woman's hand. She would wake with a smile, reaching out for the familiar face that had become her source of comfort and safety. Each morning she would run to greet the woman with laughter and joy, a living reminder of the bond that had grown between them. As the weeks passed, the matriarch realized that this little girl had changed everything in her life. She had brought light into their home, taught them patience and unconditional love, and reminded them of the simple joys of life that could easily be overlooked. The ranch, once quiet and routine, was now alive with laughter, exploration, and a love that had come unexpectedly, but had settled deeply into their hearts. Even though the shadow of the hospital mistake lingered, it became less of a burden and more of a reminder that life was unpredictable. The matriarch knew that no matter what the future held, the little girl had already left an indelible mark on their lives. Every step she took, every word she spoke, every smile she shared was a gift, a reminder of the incredible power of love and the unexpected ways it could enter one's life. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low in the sky, painting the ranch in warm shades of orange and gold, the little girl sat in the tall grass, watching the horses graze nearby. She reached out a tiny hand toward them, laughing as one of the horses lowered its head to nuzzle her fingers. The matriarch stood a few steps away, watching quietly, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. She realized that no mistake could diminish the bond they shared. The little girl had chosen them in her own innocent way, and that choice was sacred. That evening, the matriarch carried the little girl to the porch. Rocking her gently in her arms, she hummed a quiet lullaby, and the little girl's eyes began to close. "You are safe here," she whispered. "You are loved more than you will ever know." The child stirred slightly, then snuggled closer, as if understanding the words even in her small, silent way. The ranch, with its wide fields, gentle animals, and warm home, had become a place of safety, love, and belonging. The little girl had arrived by mistake, yet she had found a family in the most unexpected way. And for the ranch matriarch, who had longed for a child of her own, this little girl was more than a blessing. She was a miracle, a living reminder that love often comes when it is least expected, and that the heart can hold more than one kind of family at the same time. As the stars appeared in the sky and the ranch grew quiet, the matriarch looked down at the sleeping child in her arms and smiled. She knew that life would continue to be unpredictable, that challenges would come, and that the day might come when the little girl would have to learn the truth about her past. But for now, in this moment, all that mattered was love, and the love between them was strong, unbreakable, and real. Life at the ranch continued with its familiar rhythm, but something unseen was slowly moving toward it. While the little girl laughed and played among the fields, another woman far away was living with a quiet ache that never left her heart. She was the child's biological mother, and every morning she woke with the same thought. Her daughter was somewhere in the world, growing without her. She had never stopped searching, even when hope felt thin and exhaustion weighed heavily on her days. From the moment she realized something had gone wrong at the hospital, her life changed. Paperwork was reviewed again and again. Questions were asked, doors were knocked on. Some answers led nowhere, and others only deepened her confusion. Many nights she sat alone, holding a small blanket that once belonged to her baby, wondering if her child was warm, safe, and loved. The not knowing was the hardest part. Months passed, then more time slipped away. Still, she did not give up. One quiet afternoon, while reviewing yet another set of records, she noticed a detail that had been overlooked before. A delivery note, slightly smudged, mentioned a ranch location that did not match the official address. Her heart began to race. It was the first real lead she had found in a long time. With trembling hands, she packed a small bag and began the journey. The road to the ranch stretched long and quiet, bordered by open land and wide skies. As she drove, her thoughts raced ahead of her. What if she was wrong again? What if her child was no longer there? Or worse, what if the child did not recognize her at all? Each question tightened her chest, but she kept going. At the ranch, the day began like any other. The little girl chased a butterfly near the fence, laughing as it fluttered just out of reach. The ranch matriarch watched from the porch, smiling softly. She had learned to read the child's moods, her expressions, even her quiet moments. This little girl had become part of her in a way she could not explain. Then, a car appeared at the edge of the property. It was not common for strangers to arrive unannounced, and the matriarch felt a strange unease as she watched the vehicle slow to a stop. A woman stepped out. She looked tired, her face marked by long months of worry. But there was something else there too, determination and hope struggling to stay alive. The woman took a few steps forward, then stopped, as if unsure whether to continue. Her eyes scanned the land, the house, and then they fell on the little girl. Time seemed to pause. The biological mother's breath caught in her throat. Even from a distance, she knew. There was no doubt in her heart. The shape of the child's face, the way she tilted her head, the familiar spark in her eyes. It was her daughter. Tears welled up before she could stop them. The matriarch noticed the woman's reaction and felt her own heart tighten. Instinctively, she knew why this stranger had come. She walked toward the woman slowly, every step heavy with emotion. They stood facing each other in the open air, neither speaking at first. The little girl, sensing something different, paused her play and looked up. She ran toward the matriarch and wrapped her arms around her legs. "Mama," she said softly. The word landed between the two women like a fragile bridge. The biological mother's tears fell freely now. She pressed a hand to her mouth, overwhelmed by a mix of joy and pain. That's my daughter," she whispered, her voice shaking. The matriarch nodded slowly. "I know," she said gently. "Please, come sit down." They moved to the porch, the little girl still holding tight to the matriarch's hand. She studied the stranger with curious eyes, not afraid, just unsure. The biological mother tried to smile, though her heart felt like it might break open. They talked for a long time. Words came slowly at first, then poured out. The hospital mistake, the months of searching, the nights of fear and longing. The matriarch listened quietly, her eyes never leaving the woman's face. She could hear the truth in every word. This woman loved the child deeply. That much was clear. "I never stopped looking," the biological mother said.
"Not for one day, I believe you," the matriarch replied. "She has been loved here."
Every single day, the little girl climbed into the matriarch's lap, resting her head against her chest. The biological mother watched, her heart torn in two. She was grateful beyond words that her daughter had been cared for so well, yet the sight reminded her of everything she had missed. When the matriarch gently asked if the woman wanted to hold the child, there was a long pause. The little girl looked between them, confused. Slowly, cautiously, she reached out. The biological mother held her for the first time since the day she was born. It was everything she had dreamed of and more. The warmth of her small body, the steady rise and fall of her breathing. It felt unreal. Tears slipped down her cheeks as she whispered her daughter's name, a name the child did not yet recognize. The little girl did not pull away, but she did not fully relax either. After a moment, she turned and reached back toward the matriarch. "Mama," she said again, softly but clearly. No one spoke. The moment said everything on its own. The matriarch felt a deep ache mixed with understanding. The biological mother felt it too. Neither woman was wrong. Both loved the child. And the child, innocent and unaware of the complexity around her, was simply following her heart. That evening they agreed on one thing above all else. The little girl's happiness mattered more than pride, more than fear, more than anything else. There would be no sudden decisions, no rushed goodbyes. They would take time. They would talk. They would do what was best for the child. As the sun dipped low and the sky softened into evening colors, the little girl played quietly on the porch floor. The two women sat nearby, watching her together. It was an uncomfortable peace, but it was real. The mistake that had brought the child to the ranch had now come full circle. What once felt like a simple error had grown into something far more complicated and far more meaningful. Love had filled the space where confusion once lived. That night, as the little girl slept in her familiar bed, the biological mother stayed in a nearby guest room. The matriarch tucked the child in as she always did, brushing her hair gently from her face. "Tomorrow will be different," she whispered softly, more to herself than to the sleeping child. Outside, the ranch was quiet, but inside the hearts of those within it, everything had changed. Two mothers, one child, and a future that would not be easy, but would be shaped by care, patience, and love. The story was no longer about a mistake. It was about what happened after the truth was found, and the hardest choices were still ahead. The days following the arrival of the little girl's biological mother were quiet, yet heavy with unspoken tension. The ranch, which had always been a place of warmth and joy, now held a new kind of weight. The little girl, unaware of the complications her presence had caused, played happily in the yard, her laughter echoing across the fields. She ran freely among the animals, chasing butterflies and collecting small flowers, completely oblivious to the worry and uncertainty surrounding her. The two women, however, could not ignore the truth any longer. Every glance, every small interaction, reminded them of the bond they each shared with the child. The ranch matriarch, who had loved her since the day she arrived, felt a deep ache in her heart at the thought of losing her. She had cared for the child through every sleepless night, every small triumph, every laugh, and every tear. The idea of giving her up felt impossible. Yet she knew she could not deny the child's other mother, the woman who had never stopped searching, never stopped hoping, never stopped loving. The biological mother, for her part, was equally torn. After months of searching, after the endless nights of longing, she finally held her daughter in her arms again. And yet, she saw the comfort the child had with the matriarch. She saw the way the child reached out for the woman she called Mama, and the way her small hand fit so naturally in the matriarch's. Her heart ached with a love that wanted to take the child home, and yet at the same time, she wanted the child to be happy, even if that happiness meant staying with someone else. The first step was conversation. The women spoke for hours, sometimes sitting in silence, sometimes exchanging words filled with emotion. They shared memories of the child, stories of her small actions, the way she smiled at a butterfly, the way she laughed when the horses nuzzled her hands. Every story revealed the love they had both poured into her life and the recognition that both of them wanted the same thing, the child's well-being. "I never wanted to take her away," the matriarch said quietly one evening, her voice trembling. I fell in love with her the moment I held her. She became my heart." The biological mother reached out, brushing a tear from the matriarch's cheek. "I understand," she whispered. "I have dreamed of holding her again for so long, but I want her to be happy. If she is happier here, I will try to let her stay." It was a delicate balance, one built on understanding and shared love. The two women agreed to let the child spend time with both of them, hoping that in this way, the child could grow to know and trust them equally. But the child, in her innocent way, had begun to show where her heart truly lay. One afternoon, the three of them sat under the wide oak tree in the yard. The sun filtered through the leaves, casting a warm glow over everything. The little girl played with her toys on the soft grass, occasionally glancing up at both women. She laughed and spoke to the matriarch, calling her Mama without hesitation. She looked at the biological mother with curiosity and a quiet fondness, but there was no confusion in her gaze. She had already chosen, in the small, instinctive way only a child can, the person who had been with her from the beginning of her life, in memory. The woman who had fed her, comforted her, and loved her without question. The biological mother watched this quietly, her heart heavy but full of love. She realized that the child's happiness could not be dictated by legal papers or by longing. It had to come from the child's own heart. And in that moment, she knew that the matriarch was the one who had truly been there for the little girl. Tears came freely as she knelt down, taking the child's small hand gently in hers. "You have someone who loves you very much," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "And she has cared for you every day. I want you to be happy, more than anything." The little girl looked at her, her eyes wide, and then turned back to the matriarch. "Mama," she said simply, her small hand squeezing the matriarch's fingers. There was no hesitation, no doubt, only a quiet, pure certainty. The matriarch held her close, feeling a mixture of relief, gratitude, and love that filled every corner of her heart. She could see the understanding in the biological mother's eyes, the selfless acceptance that allowed this moment to exist. For a woman who had longed for her child for months and years, it was a quiet and painful recognition, but it was also one of the most beautiful acts of love she could imagine, putting the child's happiness above her own. From that day forward, they worked together to make the child's life as seamless and joyful as possible. The biological mother returned home with the promise that she would remain a part of the child's life, visiting regularly, reading stories, and sharing experiences. But the child remained in the care of the matriarch, the woman she called Mama, who had been her anchor and her comfort since the very beginning. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. The little girl continued to grow and thrive, surrounded by love from both women. She ran through the fields, laughed with the animals, and slept each night knowing she was safe. The matriarch guided her, taught her, and loved her without reserve, while the biological mother remained an important presence, providing stories of her own, gifts, and affection that broadened the child's world. The community around the ranch also noticed the changes. Neighbors and friends expressed admiration for the way the two women had come together for the child's sake. "That little girl is lucky," they would say. "She has so much love around her." And indeed, the child had learned from both women that love could be selfless, patient, and strong. She did not yet understand the complexities of how she came to be at the ranch, but she felt the love surrounding her and responded to it naturally, fully, and freely. The matriarch often reflected on how life could surprise people in the most unexpected ways. A mistake at the hospital had brought this little girl to her door, and that mistake had grown into a bond stronger than anything she had ever known. Love, she realized, was not always about beginnings. Sometimes it was about what came after: the care, the patience, the constant choice to put someone else's happiness above your own. There were quiet evenings when the two women would sit together watching the little girl sleep in the soft glow of the porch light. They did not speak much, but their hearts were connected through the child. There was gratitude, sorrow, love, and understanding, all mixed together in a way that words could never fully capture. They both knew the child's happiness depended on them working together, and they were determined to make that happen. One day, as the child ran through the fields chasing a butterfly that danced just out of reach, the matriarch smiled at the biological mother. "Look at her," she said softly. "She has so much joy in her heart. That is all that matters." The biological mother nodded, her eyes bright with tears. "She is happy," she said, "and that is enough. That is everything." From that moment on, the child's life settled into a rhythm of love, care, and joy. She went to bed at night knowing she was safe, woke in the morning knowing she was loved, and spent her days surrounded by laughter, adventure, and warmth. The little girl had not only changed the matriarch's life, but had also touched the biological mother's heart in ways that were gentle, quiet, and profound. The mistake that had once seemed so terrible had transformed into something beautiful. It had created a family defined not by circumstance or by blood alone, but by love, commitment, and understanding. And the little girl, innocent and wise in her own way, had shown them both that happiness could exist even in the midst of difficult choices, and that sometimes the hardest decisions were also the most rewarding. The ranch, now full of laughter and life once again, had become more than just a home. It had become a sanctuary of love and hope, where mistakes could turn into blessings, and where the heart always found a way to guide the way forward. And as the sun set behind the hills, casting long shadows over the fields, the matriarch held the child close, the biological mother standing nearby, and felt the quiet satisfaction of knowing that the most important choice had been made: the choice to love selflessly and to put the child's happiness above all else. The years passed quietly but beautifully on the ranch. The little girl who had once been delivered to the wrong place by accident was no longer a toddler but a lively, bright-eyed child full of curiosity and energy. Her hair, once soft and wispy, now fell in small, bouncing curls around her face. Her laughter still filled the house and the fields, echoing across the wide pastures and over the fences. It was a sound that brought warmth to everyone who heard it. Life had settled into a rhythm that was both natural and comforting. The little girl spent her days running through the fields, playing with the animals, and learning from the woman she called Mama. The matriarch had raised her with patience, guidance, and unconditional love. Every day she helped the child explore the world, teaching her how to care for the horses, feed the chickens, and tend to the garden. She encouraged the little girl to ask questions, to dream, and to discover everything with a fearless heart. The biological mother remained an important presence in the child's life. She visited regularly, bringing gifts, sharing stories, and teaching her about the world beyond the ranch. The visits were always full of warmth, and the little girl had learned to love her deeply as well. She called her by name, and sometimes in her innocent way she would hug both women at once, her arms stretched wide, showing that her heart could hold love for both without confusion or hesitation. The matriarch often reflected on how life had brought them all together. A mistake at the hospital, which at first seemed like a problem, had turned into the most beautiful gift she could have ever received. She had learned that family was not just about blood. It was about the people who showed up, who cared, who loved, and who made life feel safe and full of joy. The little girl had changed her life entirely, filling a space in her heart that she had thought would always be empty. Even the small town had noticed the change. Neighbors would comment on the little girl's brightness, on how happy and confident she seemed, and on the kindness and love that surrounded her. "She's lucky," they would say. "That child has so much love around her. Look at her laugh. Look at how she runs free. That ranch has given her the world." The matriarch would smile quietly, grateful that the child's happiness was visible to all, and grateful that the community had embraced them as a family, even if it had formed in an unexpected way. School days came, and the little girl was eager to learn. She loved discovering new things, reading stories about faraway places, and sharing what she had learned with the matriarch. Every evening, after a day full of lessons and play, she would return home to the ranch, her small feet pattering across the wooden floors as she called, "Mama, I'm home." The word was a constant reminder of the bond they shared, a bond that had been tested by circumstance but had grown stronger through patience, love, and understanding. The little girl's curiosity often led to small adventures around the ranch. She would explore the forests nearby, climbing trees with careful determination, or watch the clouds float lazily in the sky, imagining fantastic stories about what lay beyond the hills. The matriarch followed closely, always keeping a careful watch, yet allowing the child the freedom to explore, to learn, and to grow. It was in these moments that the woman saw the child's courage and joy, and she felt a pride deeper than anything she had known before. The biological mother participated in these adventures whenever she visited. She would walk alongside the child through the fields, helping her identify birds and flowers, telling stories about faraway lands, and laughing at the child's jokes and imaginative ideas. Together, both women taught her the value of kindness, curiosity, and courage. They showed her how to care for others, how to face challenges, and how love could be strong and patient. The little girl often noticed the small ways both women cared for her. She could feel the quiet protection of the matriarch, who had been her constant support, and the gentle encouragement of her biological mother, who had come to show her love even after months of absence. She learned that life could be complicated, but love could make it simple. She learned that family could be chosen by the heart, not only by circumstance, and that those who truly cared would always be part of her life. As she grew older, she began to understand, in small ways, the story of her beginning. The matriarch and the biological mother explained gently, at a pace she could understand, that she had been sent to the wrong ranch by accident, and that both women loved her very much. The child listened carefully, her eyes wide with understanding, and then smiled. She did not feel confusion or fear. She felt gratitude for the life she had been given, for the love that surrounded her, and for the family she had in front of her. The little girl's confidence grew alongside her understanding of love and family. She took joy in helping others, whether it was caring for the animals, helping neighbors, or simply sharing her laughter with anyone who crossed her path. She had learned, through the actions of both women, that love was about patience, selflessness, and presence. She saw how the two mothers had made sacrifices for her happiness, and she carried that lesson in her heart as she grew. Evenings were often spent together as a family. The matriarch and the biological mother would sit side by side, watching the little girl play or read, sometimes sharing quiet conversation, sometimes simply enjoying the moment. The little girl would run between them, her arms open wide, laughing at small games, telling stories, and sharing her discoveries. It was a life built on love, trust, and understanding, a life that had begun with a mistake, but had grown into something perfect in its own way. Holidays and birthdays became special times of celebration. The little girl would be surrounded by friends, neighbors, and the women who had shaped her life. They would bake cakes, play games, and laugh late into the evening. The ranch, once quiet and predictable, had become a place of joy, laughter, and memories that would last a lifetime. Through all of this, the little girl remained the heart of the home. She was a living reminder of the power of love, the resilience of the human spirit, and the beauty that could come from unexpected circumstances. The matriarch often reflected on the twist of fate that had brought her to the child. A mistake at the hospital, which could have caused heartbreak, had turned into the most profound blessing. It had given her a family she never expected, a love she never knew possible, and a purpose that filled her life with joy and meaning. The biological mother also reflected on the journey. She had longed for her child for months, then years, and now she realized that love was not about possession, but about presence, understanding, and care. She had learned that letting go could sometimes be the greatest gift of all. She watched her daughter grow, happy and confident, and felt a quiet pride that came from knowing she had done what was best. She had remained a loving presence, not as a replacement, but as a complement, and her heart was full. The little girl, innocent and joyful, had become the bridge between two women, two lives, and two sets of experiences. She had shown that love could overcome mistakes, fear, and uncertainty. She had taught the adults around her that happiness could be simple when nurtured with patience and care. She had changed their lives forever, not through words or actions alone, but simply by being herself, curious, brave, and full of love. As the sun set over the wide pastures, casting long shadows across the fields, the little girl ran freely, her laughter echoing into the evening sky. The matriarch and the biological mother watched together, a quiet understanding passing between them. They had both loved her deeply. Both had shaped her life, and both had made sacrifices for her happiness. And in that moment, everything felt right. The years had brought clarity, understanding, and a deep bond that could not be broken. The child had grown in a home filled with love, learning from two women who had taught her the meaning of family, the power of kindness, and the importance of joy. She had been delivered to the wrong place by accident, but she had found the right people to care for her, to guide her, and to love her unconditionally. And so, life on the ranch continued, filled with laughter, learning, and the quiet beauty of a family built not by chance alone, but by love, patience, and understanding.